We've already established that Sonic the Hedgehog was a revolutionary video game icon that paved the way for so many other mascot platformers. As cool as the game looked and sounded, Sonic really didn't breach Nintendo's market share all that much, even when bundled with the console. There's that, and despite the name, well, Sonic really wasn't that fast in the first game. Sega needed a better marketing campaign to really strike back against Nintendo, other than small pot shots and Sonic's hip new age attitude. If we take a look at the Sega Genesis specifications when compared to that of the Super Nintendo, we can see that the SNES trumps the Genesis in every single area. That is, of course, except for the CPU processor. This meant that the Genesis could render games much faster than the Super Nintendo, and given that Sega's mascot got his name from being fast, they now had something to take advantage of. When Sega was releasing Sonic 2, they really pushed the fact that the Sega Genesis was much faster than the Super Nintendo. In other words,
the Sega Genesis has blast processing, Super Nintendo doesn't.
Sega also gave out Sonic 2 if consumers bought the console version with the first game, which was a pretty risky move, but man, did it pay off. By now you've probably noticed this little guy on the box art right here. Sonic Team wanted to create a two-player mode where both players play simultaneously, but you can't have two Sonics on screen, so Sonic Team held a character designing contest in their HQ for Sonic's sidekick. The winner was Yasushi Yamaguchi's design of a young two-tailed fox named Miles per Hour, as a pun on miles per hour. But most of you know him as Tails. Tails turns his two tails like a turbine to give a logical explanation on why he can keep up with Sonic. He can also fly with this technique, but you'll have to wait until Sonic 3 to do it in game, so that sucks. If you plug a controller into the second port of the console, another player can control Tails. This works in all the re-releases too, so have at it. This is the sort of mode you'd enable to let a younger brother or sister play along with you. Tails' design reflects this quite nicely, being 8 years old and having two tails to emphasise the fact that he's Sonic's player too. Tails' orange colour really complements Sonic's blue, as it makes the pair more recognisable. Like Mario and Luigi for example, the colours cooperate with each other to leave an imprint on your mind. You can also play a two-player competitive mode where both players race to the finish. So what has changed from the first game? Nothing much really, and while that may seem a bit disappointing, this game more than makes up for the lack of anything new with the overall refinements and polish the game presents. Everything is much brighter and it all pops out at you while still using those darker shades of colour to make the game look easier on the eyes. Not only that, little things like the spike bug have been fixed and Sonic speed has been jacked up to insane levels. Levels have now been restructured to be much faster, and there are even more hidden routes as well as secrets for the player to find. On top of that, Sonic now has a new move which fans will recognise as the spin dash, which is basically Sonic's bread and butter. In Sonic 1, first time players may find themselves having trouble getting up hills because they don't have enough momentum. Now that you have the spin dash, by holding down and repeatedly pressing the jump button, Sonic will begin to rev up. Let go of down and Sonic will have a short burst of speed. It's more of a small push than a glorified turbo boost, as you still need to utilise the physics to your advantage. But it does get the ball rolling. Dr. Robotnik is also back, but this time his base of operations is located above Westside Island, in the completely original Death Egg.
No copyright law in the universe is going to stop me!
Sonic Disney would like to have a word with you. On top of that, there is now a 7th Chaos Emerald, because reasons. Right off the bat, you'll realise that the gameplay has a better sense of speed. Put it this way, you won't be riding blocks across lava, that's for damn sure. Instead, we're introduced to what will become staples of the Sonic the Hedgehog series, such as corkscrews and who could forget speed boosters. My favourite gimmick though is the slot machines in Casino Night Zone. Sonic 2's pacing is much better than the first one. You start off in Emerald Hill, a fast zone that's great for getting a feel of the game's controls, as well as giving you a taste of how fast Sonic really is. A bit like Green Hill, only better. Then you come to Chemical Plant Zone, a fast zone where you blast through everything without breaking a sweat until... Yeah, I'm pretty sure we all emptied our bowels at this section when we first played it as a child. I never did talk about the drowning theme that much, did I? Odds are this is the first time most players heard this track, given how popular the game was. While I didn't grow up in the 90s, I did receive a Mega Drive, aka a Genesis, that was passed down to me through a relative, and good lord, was this one of the scariest things I'd ever heard. It even even got to the point where whenever I was submerged in water in a classic Sonic game, I would mute my TV. I am not joking. In the first game, I constantly found myself going from rolling around at the speed of sound to being stopped dead in my tracks in a matter of seconds. In contrast, while you do get slowed down in Sonic 2, you're never brought to a halt. See this? Boring. This, on the other hand, is constantly encouraging me to keep going upwards further in my progression, with the challenge coming from not slipping up under pressure. Although I bet you didn't know that you can skip this section entirely. Yeah, who knew? I didn't know that either before doing research for this video. Rewarding players for their curiosity and their skills as a gamer is something that Sonic 2 excels at. Take this example in Aquatic Ruin, for example. As long as the player stays on the top route by completing the platforming challenges the game presents, you won't have to step foot in the water. Each level never overstays their welcome, not just because of their length, but because the amount of acts in each zone has been reduced from 3 to 2, with the exception of Metropolis Zone. Dreams Come True also return with even catchier songs that fit the aesthetics of the level. When I play Mystic Cave, it generally feels creepy, and with Sky Chase, I feel like sitting back and watching the clouds go by. A little touch I also like is how cinematic the final part of the game feels. You're chasing Robotnik in the tornado, with Tails getting shot down and Sonic barely making onto the winged fortress. You think you've got the Mad Doctor on the ropes, but then he uses a rocket to escape to the Death Egg. Just when you think he's got away, Tails makes a comeback, assisting Sonic to the Death Egg to take it down. As dramatic as I make that sound, level transitions weren't that common back then. It compels you to keep playing the game so you can finally beat Robotnik once and for all. That said though, I wouldn't get too overzealous, as the final bosses are nothing to scoff at, mainly because you have no rings. Silver Sonic can be a bit hard if you don't know where he'll be and when to jump, but the Death Egg robot is the star of the show. Once you get the pattern down, it's not that hard, but there's always a chance that you'll accidentally mess up the height of your jump, or you'll get a little too confident and go for an extra hit, ultimately leading to your downfall. Not helping this is the fact that you take 16 hits instead of 8, making the fight more tense if you mess up. If you do manage to pull through, you're treated to a fantastic ending of a helpless Sonic falling from the Death Egg with Tails coming to his rescue, showcasing the bond between Sonic and Tails. Now, Sonic 2 may be a very well crafted game, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have its problems. Hilltop Zone is often criticised for being slow, sluggish and overall boring. I think that's only because the other zones go by so fast. Emerald Hill takes about a minute, Chemical Plant takes about 2 if you're lucky, Aquatic Ruin about the same depending on which pathway you take, and Casino Night you're too distracted by the slot machines to even care. By the time you're finished with the thrill ride that was the last few zones, Hilltop Zone just sticks out like a sore thumb. If Sonic 1's problem is that it had too much platforming and not enough speed, then Sonic 2's problem is that it doesn't do a good job of easing you into the more platform heavy sections. Secondly, some of the enemy placement in this game is downright cheap. You could be going up a vertical shaft in Metropolis Zone only to get a surprise attack from a slicer when you reach the top. Similarly, in the same zone there's another badnik called Shellcrackers who are put in very tight hallways. That wouldn't be so much of a problem if this particular enemy didn't have a giant claw and a very tiny hitbox. This isn't a one-zone occurrence either, like the grounders popping out the walls in Aquatic Ruin, despite the game encouraging you to move in that direction. I get that you're supposed to be observant, but these sorts of traps work better in NES platformers like Castlevania or Mega Man, because you're given a better view of your surroundings. The trap is usually shown to you before you have a chance to fall for it, like the time bombs in the first Mega Man. Additionally, your character doesn't have as much acceleration as Sonic. The reason why robots can be destroyed with a simple jump is because your mind is fixated on the rush you're getting from the sense of speed, rather than taking the time to stop and look around. When enemies do have a specific way of being taken out, it's usually in the slower parts of the level, like the Caterkillars in Marble Zone. Even the neutrons from Sonic 1 didn't blindside you. They would appear, then wait for a few seconds for the player to register that there's incoming danger. True, the ring mechanics are still there, so the difficulty is nowhere near as high as Castlevania and the like, but if you're going for the Chaos Emeralds, you feel cheated out your chance to get one. Well, I can't hold this off much longer. Let's talk about those special stages. They suck. I know what you're going to say, these are some of the most iconic special stages in Sonic history, but that doesn't mean they're good. You enter a special stone by hitting a star post with 50 rings. If you've done that, a cluster of stars will appear. Jump into them and you'll be taken into a half pipe. The goal of each special stage is simple. The game will tell you how many rings you need to collect, and all you need to do is collect them while avoiding bombs. Sounds simple when you put it like that. Here's the thing, while the control is very responsive, that doesn't mean anything when these special stages pretty much rely on you memorizing where the rings are. Rings do carry over when going into the second segment. But with all the twists and turns that can sometimes hold a bunch of rings, you're not going to get the Chaos Emeralds on your first attempt. And honestly, the turns are not what I call a smooth transition. Oh yeah, really funny Sega, as if the last Chaos Emerald wasn't hard enough to get already. What I'm trying to say is that it should be much clearer on where the rings are coming from, and when the next turn's going to be. Maybe have an arrow on screen or something. However, it gets much worse if you choose to have Tails tag along, as he can pick up rings. That's great, I hear some of you say. No it isn't, because he can also lose rings, and if he's collected a whole bunch of them, you can basically just kiss that emerald goodbye. If that wasn't bad enough, the ring requirement is also higher. Tails can get in your way even outside the special stages. In boss battles, if you try and hit Robotnik, Tails will sometimes jump after you, activating Robotnik's invincibility frames for a brief second, causing you to get hurt as a result. By retrieving all 7 Chaos Emeralds, you actually get something this time. Collect 50 rings, then jump, and Sonic will be transformed into Super Sonic. Super Sonic not only increases Sonic's speed even further, but it also makes him completely invincible. The feeling of empowerment is great, but if I'm perfectly honest, Super Sonic kind of takes away from some of the fun I have with this game. Also, it kinda ruins the ending for me too. It's the video game equivalent of being on a sugar rush. You have tons of energy to start with, but that energy quickly wears away. Super Sonic also takes away any challenge the bosses might have had. Not that they're anything to write home about anyway, though they have gotten better. The Oriel Ocean and Wing Fortress bosses still give me trouble no matter how many times I beat them. I wouldn't be that bothered by Super Sonic if I didn't transform into him every time I got 50 rings. It makes precise platforming found in zones like Metropolis and Wing Fortress much more of a chore than it needs to be. I'm sure we've all heard of that inescapable spike pit in Mystic Cave Act 2. Believe me, it's just as bad as it sounds. Some would argue that it's a punishment for falling down the hole in the first place, in which I agree. But why isn't this just a bottomless pit? Not only is this pointless, but if you're Super Sonic, it wastes the player's time. Speaking of wasting the player's time, am I the only one that doesn't particularly like Sky Chase? Having an auto-scrolling level is really contradictory to the pace of the classic Sonic games. Games that for all intents and purposes allow the person playing to go through the levels at their own pace. So why am I suddenly told you have to play it by the game's rules? It's quite infuriating. The game has its issues, but they aren't as big as a turn-off compared to Sonic 1. Heck, you'll be burning so much rubber that you won't even care. Sonic 2 is a perfect example of how you make a sequel, by taking everything out that didn't work and expanding on ideas that did. The fact that I can go back and have just as much fun with this game as when I first played it really speaks for the game's quality. Join me next time where we look at the cult classic Sonic the Hedgehog CD for the Sega CD.